Are you listening? Damn.
And a big welcome back to the Endurance Hour Podcast, episode 361, alongside Kona coach Wendy Mader. I'm Dave Erickson. Glad to have you with us again this week. A big week for me. I'm preparing for my first 70.3 in a few years. And I don't know how big of a week it is for Wendy, but she's got a lot of answers to your questions that you submitted. And we'll get right to it, beginning with Frank. Frank writes, I think I saw you touch on the subject in a podcast recently or a post lately. The topic of when or when not to train if you're sick or injured. I'm miserable as much from not training, having to miss workout days from being sick. There seems to be a lot of guilt, at least for me, just sitting still and recovering my health and strength. Resting to him is counterintuitive to the training mindset. I understand. Like I said, I know you have done this segment or topic before, but I think it's a great subject to go deeper into. Wendy, when you're sick, what do you do? Do you feel guilt? Where does that fit into your training plan?
So this is, again, a great topic. There's a lot of things I want to touch on, not just the point of training while sick, but we'll start there. So we did a podcast. We probably have it up on the Endurance Hour YouTube channel. I don't remember which one, where, you know, when you're sick, whether to train or not, just depends on what your symptoms are. Are you sick with a fever, congestion? Is it in the chest? Is it in the head? Body aches, again, that usually has to do with a fever. Do you have a sniffles? Do you have a cough? Is it the flu? Is it a cold? Is it COVID? You know, COVID kind of changes things too, because no one knows the long-term effects of having COVID. So to train or not to train, keep it simple. If you're not feeling great, take a rest day. I mean, it's as simple as that. Sometimes if you're not feeling great and you try to push the training and follow specific details of intensity and duration, you could come out of that feeling worse. And again, it just depends on the symptoms. So in my case, again, the best thing to say is if you're not feeling that great, just take an extra day off. Recovery is part of the training. Recovery is not counterintuitive. That's just part of the training. So you got to change that mindset of what rest days actually mean. The general recommendations, though, like that you're going to search for online, is if you have a chest cold, so if it's below the neck in your chest and body aches, you should probably take a complete day off. If your symptoms are above the neck, like a congestion in your nose, and it could or may not be a sinus infection, or if you just have a headache, then go ahead and do some light training. You know, cut out some duration, cut out the intensity, see how you feel. You may feel better because training does provide those endorphins. And so sometimes it's exactly what you need to clear your sinuses out. I've told people sometimes if you're dealing with sinus issues, I tell them to go in the pool. It's a great way to clear out your sinuses. It's like a neti pot with chlorine in it. So again, you always got to look at what are the symptoms. If you're sick, you could be sick for a reason. You know, maybe you're overtraining, or just overtraining just has more to do with just training. Maybe you have a lot of stress in your life with family, school, work, and then add training on top of that. You just have you're in a high stress situation, and sometimes getting sick and or injured is your body's way of telling you you need to rest and you do need to back off.
Totally. Yeah. If you've overtrained, maybe that's why you're getting sick. If you're not getting enough rest, it can be a real issue for working parents in general.
You know, and again, I want to touch on it's one of the benefits of kind of keeping log notes of metrics, like how much sleep you're getting, what's the quality of sleep like, what's your stress level like. You know, Training Peaks has this icon that you can rate all these things in your life that impact your training, so you can go back and look at that. Or your coach can look at that and kind of see, well, you know, the past 3 days you've indicated that you've only gotten 3 hours of sleep and your volume of training is really high. It makes sense that you're sick. Or if you've been in a crowd, if you're a school teacher and you're around a lot of kids, or if your spouse or family has an illness, the chances of you getting it are a little bit higher as well. So there's just a lot of factors that you want to look into. But again, keep it simple. If you're not feeling that great, take a day off. Now, in Frank's case, I followed up with his email. I actually personally coach him. He went on a ride on Monday, and he indicated that he wasn't feeling great. And looking at the data from that ride, he couldn't get his heart rate up. His power was really low. His rate of perceived effort was really high. And I called him on Tuesday and said, you need to take time off, because that training there was no value in that training. No value at all. So again, weighing the value and the pros and cons of the training session, as well as weighing the pros and cons of the future training sessions or future race. It's better to rest now and recover from the illness and or injury rather than to push through it and have that illness, cold, virus, whatever it is, linger because you didn't take time off, or have that injury linger because you didn't take time off. So then in the future, it's going to compound and you're going to need more time off.
Yeah. Yeah. The longer you sit in that sickness or work out through that sickness, the longer you are getting back to where you should be, right? Like maybe take 2 steps back so you can take 5 steps forward.
Yes. In this case, for sure. And then I also want to touch on this guilt, like why athletes feel guilty. I can't remember, what that feels like. I'm sure there's been, in my future or in my past, in the beginning of my training, maybe I had some guilt. I don't know if guilt's the right emotion to describe how you feel of taking a day off. If you take a day off just to take a day off and there's really no rhyme or reason, then you're going to feel a certain emotion. If you're taking a day off because you're sick or injured, you should really be proud of yourself for allowing yourself that day off and making that wise decision to take a day off. And you shouldn't feel guilty at all. If you're ever feeling any guilt about missing a training session, I always recommend then you assess the reason you're doing it. Maybe you're doing it for the wrong reason. Maybe you're doing it for the right reason, but you really gotta like dive deeper into that feeling or that emotion. And is it really guilt, or is it just, I'm frustrated. I have a race in 2 weeks and I just had a week off, guilt or frustration or something else.
With that, if we can, this is, a bit of a segue, but similar. How do you navigate your taper week before a big race when you're not training as much, but you want to train? This is kind of the opposite. You're forcing yourself to take time off because you are preparing for a race.
Again, another great topic. When an athlete tapers, how they taper is all dependent on the build. The build is the weeks preceding the taper. So if you get sick, let's say you're training for a 70.3, generally you're going to have about a 2-week taper. If you get sick in that 3 weeks out or 2 weeks out, well, then the taper is going to change. You're not going to need to rest as much as if you were able to have solid training 2 to 3 weeks out. And so I still am going to err on the side of still follow the proper plan if you're following a training plan and the proper progression of a decrease of volume with a slight maintenance of intensity. And a lot of times forced rest due to sickness or injury allows the athlete to rest more. And that's exactly what they need to peak and have a best race of their life. Mm-hmm. That's happened to me. That's happened to a lot of athletes I coach. There's something about a forced taper when you're sick or injured that will allow you to still have the best performance of your life.
How do you talk to the athletes you coach about being patient during that last 10 days when they're itching about, I feel like I need to get out there because they're healthy. I need to get out there and do something, versus maybe this is probably some, beginner athletes or early on, because as you get older, or the more you're into, why that's important to rest and how the bars, you're going to intersect into a peak fitness or a peak performance ability on race day. They don't quite understand that just yet. How do you talk them through of being patient?
First, I'll share my experiences, because back in the day when I started, I missed a lot of qualifying for Kona. I used to do this race in Lubbock, Texas each year. This was back in the 90s. And I would always go into it exhausted because I didn't really know how to taper. I didn't understand it. I just kind of I kind of winged it. All my training back then, I just winged it. There was really not a lot of information out there. And I'd always go into that race exhausted. And so I would perform okay, but I'd always miss qualifying because I was exhausted. So I always share stories of those times where I've been injured. I've had 8 weeks off of training before an Ironman, and the marathon was the best part of the whole race. And I just had 8 weeks off, go figure. And then just, there's a lot of data and a lot of science out there that can, if someone's a data person and really likes to see that research, I'll go to my respected sources and I'll share some, blogs or articles about the benefits of a taper, decrease in volume, slight increase of intensity, decrease in volume, and that's kind of how you peak. And just the progression, educate them on the progression and how important the build is and what they were able to accomplish in the build phase, and just stress the importance of recovery. Steve Magnus and Brad Stallberg say rest plus rest equals growth. And so, no, what did I say? Rest plus whatever it is.
You said rest plus rest.
Now I can't think of the quote, but rest is part of the training process. That's where your body recovers, and that's where peak performance happens.
Have you had post-race conversations from both athletes, one who trained through it and then one who said, well, I'm glad I followed your plan and trusted what you said because you were right? Yes.
I'm gonna talk about Sean. We've talked about him in the past. He followed our 70.3 program leading up to Chattanooga 70.3, and he had an injury during the program, and he consulted with me a few times about the injury, and then he also got sick. And so we just talked about, the benefits of him being sick at that time allowed him to not only help him recover from the foot injury or the foot issue he was having, but it just allowed his body to recover. And he ended up just sticking with the plan and following it to the end, and he was successful at it. And so a lot of it is experience, trusting the process, trusting your coach or trusting the plan, and just kind of giving into, I am going to just follow this, 80, 90, 100%, see what happens, keep a log of what's worked, what didn't work, and then make some changes if you need to going forward.
Have you had that athlete who says, darn it, I should have listened to you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you were right. Again, you're right either way, but you're right that I should have followed the plan instead of training through it. And then, of course, you're right because I trusted your plan and did it correctly, and I had a good race.
Yeah. And, a lot of times, like we as coaches don't know the behind the scenes. If an athlete doesn't communicate with us, if they don't keep the training log, it's really up to, we also have to trust the athletes giving us and communicating with us as honestly as we expect them to. I know, and I coach athletes who I know, because I know them by now, that they're not that they're lying to me, but they're not fully all honest with me. They lack some communication in the point of, I know they're tired, but they don't want to tell me, because if they tell me, they know I'm going to suggest a decrease in volume or a decrease in intensity in their future workouts. So I know they kind of keep it from me, but I'll do it anyways. I plan ahead and say, okay, I know this athlete's tired based on their data, based on the training that I've already given them, based on past experiences. I'm going to overcompensate and over rest them, because they're always going to do more than I tell them to do anyway.
Yeah. Anything else you want to talk about with Frank's question, or?
No, I think we covered it all. I mean,
Okay.
I think the main thing is diving into that feeling of guilt and really understanding, is that the right emotion you're feeling, or is it something else?
Okay. This from Kathy. Kathy's we talked about a podcast about bike cadence, and it was very informative, she says. She asks, what is the ideal cadence when racing? And is it the same as when training?
Yeah, I mean, again, that's a good question. It's definitely person to person, but generally in most races, triathlons, athletes are going to be at about a 75 to 85 RPMs while they race. And so if you're going up a hill, depending on the grade and the length of the hill, you're going to want to keep it in a gear that you can try to maintain, in that 75 range. When you're going downhill, you want to keep it in a gear where you're not spinning out much more above 90. Again, it just depends on the length and the grade of the hill. But an ideal cadence when racing is going to be in that 75 to 85 range. That's where most athletes are going to be most efficient at producing the most amount of power at the least amount of effort, if that makes sense.
It does. This is from thebodymechanic.com out of Australia, just because I typed in ideal bike cadence, just gives you other input. They said it's different for most cyclists. Aiming for around 90 RPM is a good goal, while recreational cyclists typically cycle around 60 to 80. And those are recreational cyclists, not triathletes, while the advanced or elite cyclists pedal anywhere from 90 to 110. So that's just one example. There's also one about what is the 75 rule in cycling. And they say 75% rule states that during a given training week, at least 75% of your miles should be at or below 75% of your maximum heart rate, which has nothing to do with cadence. I thought it did. My bad.
Well, and again, on that note, that's why at least the athletes I coach, as well as the training plans that we created, we have a lot of workouts that have varied cadence. Some intervals I suggest a 60 RPM, some intervals I suggest 100 RPMs. And so you as the athlete are paying attention, I hope, to understanding where you're most efficient at producing the most amount of power with the least amount of effort and going the fastest.
Yeah. This is something I should have brought this up. I thought about this when you're talking about recovery or resting. So a lot of your devices will tell you, you start your workout a day after a previous workout. Like for my Garmin watch, it'll say your training is good today, or now's a good time to train, or you need so many hours before your next workout should be attempted. And with this cadence, with all your data, you can see I've been noticing what my average cadence is on my outdoor rides, which is inconsistent because of the uphills and the downhills, the coasting and stuff. But I know it's lower than what I want it to be in a race. But as I'm reconfiguring my data screens for my upcoming race this weekend, I have positioned things to where I want to see I broke it down by time was my top one, 8 different data screens. Time, power was my number 2, because that's what I want to focus on, because it's a very hilly course, like over 3,000 feet of elevation gain. Power, and then I had maybe speed, average speed, cadence, average power was in there somewhere, cadence, and I had heart rate.
So these are the screens that you're watching on your Garmin, or whatever you're using while you're racing.
And I had some on there that had calories, and I just didn't set it up specifically. I just was like, oh, it's there, and I was just too lazy to redo it. But I wanted to say, okay, what's important for this race, and what do I want to see? What are important metrics? And I wanted to see what my current power was, my average power, just for the day. Speed, average speed, because I think I was more interested in average speed versus speed, because I wanted to know if I'm doing a half Ironman, I need to be above a certain average by the end of the race. But I also wanted to see the power. Power is more important. And then heart rate had to be in there. Cadence, just curious. I wanted to see where my cadence is. I think it may have had average cadence for the day, because I want to stay within I want to stay between 85 and 90, but most likely 85 on the day.
Nice.
So for me, I'm looking at in those definitely over 80. If I can get 90, that's great, but it's hard for me to attain 80 on a full ride, unless it's indoors. But then indoors, you're doing interviews and intervals and power, so that could be thrown off. Either way. Next question from Judy. Do you have an opinion about fasted cardio? I haven't heard about this before. What is this?
So Judy's another client that I personally coach. And I mean, I do have an opinion. It just depends on who's asking. That was actually what I followed up with her, is it depends who's asking. There's a lot of, if you Google, the benefits of doing cardio in a fasted state, like in the morning before you eat, what are the benefits? What are the pros and cons? And I think it's going to vary person to person, athlete to non-athlete. I think, when it comes to fat metabolism, you can train your body. Again, this is based on my own personal, not even my own personal, I'll touch on that in a second. It's just based on the studies and the registered dietitians that I talk to. Can you really train your body to metabolize fat for fuel And as one of those ways to do that is to exercise in the morning and before you eat or drink anything. I think there's a lot of cons if you're an athlete to doing that, in the fact that, depending on the duration of your workout or intensity of your workout, if you don't eat or drink anything, that may limit your ability to, execute the intention of the workout. If you're someone who's kind of a general fitness enthusiast and you're trying to something new, you're trying to lose weight, yeah, maybe it may help. It may help you. Again, I'm not the researcher who's done these studies. So it just depends on mainly the context of what you're trying to accomplish. I think when you're trying to, train your body to burn fat for fuel, there's more to it than just, exercising or training in a fasted state. There's more to it. And if you're trying to lose weight, if you're just a non-athlete trying to lose weight, there's more to it than exercising in a fasted state. Sure, if you're exercising or training in a fasted state, your body's going to, jump into metabolizing fat for fuel if the duration is long enough. So it just depends on why you're doing it. Now, getting back to me, an athlete that I coached last year or 2 years ago asked me, what I thought about intermittent fasting. And that's usually where you only eat between like the hours of noon and 7. And then after 7 o'clock at night, you're fasting for 12 hours. And then you don't eat again till noon the next day. And I had no really thought or desire to do that, but she got me thinking. And then when my husband did it last year, about a year ago in June, I'm like, I'm going to try this intermittent fasting thing out. And the way I went about it is, I started with, first time I'd eat at like 9 o'clock in the morning. Then I pushed it to 11 o'clock, and then I pushed it to 1 o'clock. And I do all my training in the morning. So I always had fuel. I always had carbohydrate with me just in case I needed it. But I really, mentally was like, this is a challenge. I'm motivated by challenges. Let's see how far I can push the envelope and train. And again, I was in a fasted state, and my training was actually fantastic. And I didn't notice anything that it was very harmful for me. And I still performed really well in my training sessions. And I probably lasted about 3 months of doing this. Mm-hmm. And I also kept track of my calories. So overall, between my hours of like, say, noon to 8 or 1 to 7 or 1 to 8 when I was eating, I was still eating the same amount of calories as I would have if I was eating between, 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. So even though I was doing the intermittent fasting, my caloric consumption was still the same. So these are just a few things that I was keeping track of. I actually kept a log of everything I was doing. I haven't looked at it in a few months. So yeah, that's my opinion about fasted cardio.
Is that one of the goals, is to maintain the caloric intake from the non-fasting
No,
periods?
I think most people do who do intermittent fasting, and again, based on the research and based on people I talk to, I think it's okay to do. I think it's kind of a healthy way to go to maintain your body weight. I think most people do it, end up eating less, and that's why they lose weight doing it. I'm the athlete who was training for an Ironman while I was doing it. And yes, I got really lightweight last year, and I've kind of maintained my body weight since last year. I'm up a couple pounds, but not much. And I don't do intermittent fasting at all. But I think from a health perspective and a weight maintenance, I think it really allows people, athletes and non-athletes, to be very mindful of when they're eating and what they're eating. Because when you have to wait till noon to eat, you're kind of like planning it out. And when you start to eat, I think I actually enjoyed it more because it was like, yes, this is what I want. This is what I'm craving. I'm going to savor it. And then I have the next 8 hours that I can keep eating. And for me as an athlete, that was important because I was going to stop eating at 8 o'clock and I was going to train the next morning. So I wanted to make sure I was still fueled to do my morning training sessions.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
I just had a good conversation about that a couple of days ago about fueling and about how your meals leading up to your race day or even the night before can impact your performance. And if you're unaware of why your performance is not as where it should be or where you think it should be, look at your diet. Look at what you ate the day before to see what kind of storage you had. How big was your breakfast? Everyone's got some, a certain amount of calories on board, and it's a losing battle the longer distances you race of what you burn and what you can consume. But if you didn't have enough in the tank to begin with, how are you going to perform? But to keep track of that is really important. And making those good decisions on race week, whether it's hydration, which I'm very aware of right now, where I'm aware. It's like, I should probably get a little bit of that. Even though I'm not that thirsty, I should probably put something down. Or I should probably just, I'll just do a banana right now. I'm not hungry, but I know it's good for me right now. Or I'll just do an apple. I mean, just these little things.
Yeah. And again, going back to context is everything. I'm an experienced athlete who's been doing this for 30 years. I've tried probably every nutrition that's ever been out there. In my 30 years. And so I'm not just some beginner athlete who heard about intermittent fasting who's going to starve themselves. And it also goes back to like training in the heat. When I'm purposefully training in the heat right now for acclimatization purposes, but I'm training in the heat where I'm close to my home or close to a facility where if I'm feeling any issues, I can stop and go inside and cool off. And I'm carrying my hydration with me because if I'm feeling any issues, I have hydration to get me through it, and I'm carrying calories with me in case I have any issues in the heat. I'm really prepared to combat the heat. So, it's all about taking steps slowly and introducing new things. Like if you're going to introduce fasted cardio or intermittent fasting or a new carbohydrate nutrition plan, just take it. Start slow and kind of add or decrease as you acclimate to whatever you're doing.
This is not a question on our list, but I want to bring it up because you talked about training in the heat on purpose. And I did that last year when we had, and it was more of an ego thing, but also because I know I'm not good in the heat, is that I want to get better in the heat. So let's kind of have a little brainstorm session here about how do you prepare, the kind of things that you do and the benefits of training in harsher conditions.
Well, I'm training for Kona. It's going to be hot. I've done Kona 10 times. I know my body generally does pretty well in the heat. We are having an extreme heat wave here in Atlanta, Georgia. And so instead of always complaining about it, I'm thriving in it and saying, all right, 3:00 in the afternoon, before I go coach the kids, I'm going to go run 2 miles because it's in the heat. And I get excited because it's only going to prepare my body and mind to battle the conditions in Kona in October. So I'm going to do this, weekly over the next 4 months as I prepare. And like I said, I know my body does pretty well in the heat. Last week I ran 5 miles at 3:00 in the afternoon, and I knew at mile 4 I probably should have stopped. But again, I was running around Lifetime, so I was very close to go indoors anytime I wanted to. And so I made it to 5 miles, and I'm like, that's it. I'm starting to feel the impact of symptoms of heat exhaustion. I know what heat exhaustion is. I know what heat stroke is. And so I'm very aware and mindful of what I'm doing to my body and mind. And I'm not just going out and running 5 miles out and being 5 miles away. I have to run 5 miles back because training in the heat could be very detrimental to some people if they aren't used to it.
What you said there was like you went from 4 to 5 and then you recognized what the heat exhaustion would feel like. I think that is a great learning lesson of testing, like, just like you test with food or you test with training.
Yeah.
You test the weather and to see what you feel like, and then you're building an experience. You're building an archive of emotions or experiences. So when it is on race day, you're familiar or you're not familiar.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know what this feels like yet, or I haven't gone to this point, or I have been to this point. Now I know what it feels like. Just like riding, just like you're training for for an Ironman on the bikes. Like, I need to know what it feels like to go 112 miles. That's why I go 120. So if you go into the heat going, okay, I've done 4 before, but I've never been to 5 in this heat. On race day, I need to know what that feels like. So do it in training so you're comfortable with what the feeling is going to be with. Not that you're comfortable, but you understand what that feel is going to be. See, same with why you suggest people run on tired legs after a bike ride, that brick double workout. you need to know what it feels like. So when you get out of T2, you're like, oh, I've been here before, and this will go away. This initial heaviness on my legs will go away, but you need to build that confidence. And I think that's one of the things I like to do with these extreme weather is like, okay, I can do it. I can weather this. I can go through this and be okay because I've done it before. And I want to encourage that triple digit day just so I can go, all right, let's see if I can do this today. How far can I go today versus last time? And did I bring enough hydration this time around? That, these little things like, oh, was I hungry? When did I run out? Based on, temperature XYZ versus temperature XYZ.
Yeah, and it's really important to be hydrated before you attempt this heat acclimatization that you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Be super hydrated beforehand. Because again, you don't want to get in that situation where bam, something clicks and you're like dying out there, and you're not close to anything. You just want to be really prepared because it could be dangerous.
Have you ever done it the other way around, where extreme cold or extreme wind or extreme something else?
Yeah, I mean, I used to, it's funny because I hate cold. I used to thrive doing cold training. So a few years ago, we're probably talking 3 years ago, I was following Wim Hof. He's the Iceman who
Cold
does
plunging.
Yeah. And so I researched him, and an athlete kept sharing, because he was doing it. And so he kept sharing me what he was doing. So I said, I'm going to do it. And so there were days that years, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, that it would be 30 degrees. I'd go to Lifetime, do my workout. I'd come home. It would be 30 degrees out. I'd go put on a tank top and shorts and go run in 30 degrees or less. Kind of the same idea. I was acclimating to this ice cold conditions, and I was doing the ice baths and the ice showers, and Lifetime's pool over the winter, November, December, January, February was about 50 to 55 degrees. So I was taking those ice water plunges as cold as I could, had access to in the pool. And so, yeah, that's when I did it.
Okay.
I don't like that. I don't like that at all. I haven't done it since, but I was very committed. Again, it was something new. It was a challenge. I'd never experienced that where I was intentionally thriving on cold air and tank top and shorts and the coldest air that I could get here in Georgia.
There sometimes depends on the location where the weather on race day could be one of 3 different things. And you have to bring all different types of clothing and accessories to survive it. And knowing it's going to be, the water temperature is a lot colder than I thought. Do I have what I need to prepare? Do I have booties? Do I have some sort of thing for my head to cover my ears, something like that? And same thing with the bike. There was, I think, whether it was Ironman Tahoe, which I think has been discontinued since.
Yeah, I remember that year.
I was at the inaugural one covering it as, for Ironman, and, people were still wearing, I have footage of it somewhere, of Matt Russell had bags over his hands, or he had like snow gloves for the bike because it was so cold.
It snowed that year, didn't it?
Well, it may have snowed, but they're starting at the lake and they were climbing up. So it was already cold, and there was like steam coming off the water. And there was there's the hypothermia concern about the water being colder than the air temperature, vice versa, something like that, and whether you may or may not cancel the swim because of that difference in air and water temperature. But people were wearing different things like crazy just to prepare for the different, conditions from one elevation to the next. So I guess the point I brought that up is training in all these different conditions. That way you are a little more mentally prepared for the day, because you don't know what the day is going to have. It could be a cold day, it could be a hot day. Have you trained in both? If you have, then you're going to be a little more comfortable in your skin than someone who hasn't.
Yep, I agree.
2 options here, Wendy. We can do your most recent question that you sent to me from Tom, or the one about the PIDS question, post-Ironman depression syndrome.
Let's do Tom's question.
About the couch to half Ironman?
Yeah.
Okay, this is cool.
So Tom followed our Couch to Half Ironman question, and he actually, I think last week or 2 weeks ago, he asked us a question about, again, missing a week of training, if he was supposed to just jump in the plan with the missed week, or if he was trying to make up missed workouts, yada, yada, yada. And so his race was June 18th. So I followed up with him, asked him about his race, and his response was, overall, I was pleased with my race. He had a tough lead up to the race with travel for family, work stress, and so he had less than ideal recovery. He was a little bit, high stress with the travel, so he didn't feel as rested as he wanted to. As for the race itself, I was able to control my effort on the swim and early bike. I dropped some nutrition and a water bottle on the bike and went over an hour before getting to the next bottle exchange. I was able to recover and started the first half of the run strong before bonking at mile 6. In addition to getting better rest leading up to the race, I need to figure out a good nutrition plan. I was only taking in about 200 calories per hour on the bike, while I burn about 500 calories per hour on the bike and 600 calories per hour on the run. What is your experience with liquid nutrition? Is it better way than gels and fig bars? What percentage of calories burned should I try to replace?
Wow.
Again, thanks for the feedback. Thanks for sharing your race report. Great questions. So I want to start off by saying we've done some podcasts. We did a great podcast with Cindy Dallow, who's a PhD RD. I think it was episode 190. And Dave has since also posted some great content on the Endurance Hour YouTube channel with Stacy Sims, who's got her PhD RD recommendations for how much you should be eating for a sprint, for an Olympic, for a 70.3, and for 140.6. That's on the Endurance Hour YouTube channel. And, you don't need to, if you expend 500 calories per hour, you don't need to intake 500 calories per hour. The general rule of thumb for most people is to try to intake 60 to 90 grams of carbohydrate per hour. They say, again, the research, if you're a very large person, maybe you can take as much as 100 to 110 grams, but most people GI tract can't absorb more than 90 grams per hour. So again, you want to start on the low end through training and increase that. So if you're finding that 200 calories per hour, which is probably roughly 55 to 60 grams of carbohydrate, you bump that up, go to 250, go up to 300, practice in training. You have time before your next race, practice in training, see how your gut feels with more calories. As far as liquid calories versus gels and fig bars, I've done both ways. My best race was in 2008, and it was liquid. It was Gatorade. I had my sweat rate tested, and so I knew how much Gatorade I needed, how much water, and 1 gel per hour. So I had a bottle of Gatorade, a bottle of water, and 1 gel for every hour on the bike, and that worked out really well for me. I've also been in the sport for 30 years. I don't really do gels or those, power bar products anymore, because I just don't want them, because I've had them for so many years of my triathlon history. So I tend to rely on pretzels on the run. Gatorade works great for me. So pretzels, water, Gatorade on the run. And then I have these cookies that I like to eat. Cookies are just a energy bar in disguise. So it's basically the same thing, but I really enjoy them and I really crave them. So I've definitely changed my nutrition over the years, and I found out what works for me. And so there's just a lot of products out there. Just make sure you dial in how much do you need per hour. So I'm going to suggest going to that 60 to 70 grams per hour. And as far as what percentage of calories burned should you be trying to replace, like I said, you're probably only going to want to replace about half. So if you expend 500, you should probably intake at least 250.
Yeah, I've heard, and I follow up for me, I weigh 190, that I can consume no more than 300 calories per hour of racing. I was going to say exercise, but of racing. So, I'm going to burn more than that on the bike easily. So I'm not going to win that battle ever, nor am I going to win the running battle ever. No, not many people can. I don't know if you can at all, period. That's where that big breakfast comes into play, or the meal the night before comes into play. But the carbohydrate thing, that works with your calories, isn't it? No matter what.
Yeah. So 60 grams of carbohydrate there's 4 calories per gram. So 60 times 4 is 240 calories.
Mm-hmm.
And again, everyone's a little bit different. The higher intensity you race, the more calories you expend. Lower intensity, you expend less calories. So, an hour ride at 60% effort is going to expend less calories than an hour ride at 100% effort. So again, it's all about training and preparation and trying new things. What works for me might not work for you. But again, there are general guidelines out there to follow, which are, it's like a training zone. You want to train in zone to 90 to 100%. Calories, you want to take anywhere between 200 and 300. It's just a zone.
Yeah. And
to practice.
Totally agree.
And what a great experience. You took some notes, you did a post race review of what worked, what didn't work. You bonked at mile 6, you knew how many calories you were taking. Now you make some changes and see how the next race goes.
Yeah, totally. I mentioned I'm preparing for something this weekend. What are you in the preparation zone for, or are you maybe just in some base for something else?
I'm focused on cycling. I have a 100-mile ride. It's called the Georgia 400 this weekend. So it's a supported century ride. There's going to be thousands of athletes. And I've done one century already by myself earlier in the month. And so I'm excited to do one that's supported. It's going to be a little bit hillier. It's going to be a little less, I think I'm not going to race it. It's just going to be, I've done it before. I haven't done it since 2018. So I have an idea of how fast it's going to take me and kind of what I'm going to do. So I'm really excited about it because when I did it in 2018, I was not in 100-mile fitness and I struggled. And so I'm excited to do it again just to see how I do. And then I have swim meets this weekend that I'm focused on as well. So I'll actually do my 100-mile ride, and my swimmers don't swim until the afternoon. So I'll just get right in the car, drive to Atlanta and go to the swim meet. So we'll see how that goes.
Isn't it funny?
So yeah, I'm just in training mode right now.
It's funny, people like you and some people like me who can get a lot of training miles in before noon, and then you run into someone later in the day and they're just a non-athlete or just a regular person and they have no idea. Like, was it on your birthday one day, one of the podcasts that you ran a marathon before we did the podcast?
I think I was done at 11 a.m.
Yeah, it's like, that's what you did. And then your kids that you're coaching, some may or may not know, like, yeah, coach just rode 100 miles today before she came out here. It just, I think it's kind of cool that you walk, like, let's say I do something big and I clean up and next thing you know, half hour later I'm in a grocery store and no one has any idea what I just did. But to me, I feel like I just accomplished a lot today, or before a certain time of days. Yeah, I'm done today. Boy, this feels so good. Like if I'm able to get out and swim and run before 11 o'clock and going to lunch, and it's like, I don't have to, the rest of my day's open. I got the training done. It's such a relief. And I like training in the morning anyway, if I can.
I'm so lucky. I went on a ride with my girlfriends on Tuesday. We went to the northern Georgia mountains. And like I said, we've had a heat wave here. So we started our ride at 7:30 and it was much cooler being north. It did get hot towards the end of our ride, and we did this ride called the 3 gaps. Plus we added an extra gap at the end. So I ended up getting, this is pretty epic for me, 68 miles and over 7,000 feet of elevation gain. And my girlfriends, because I started a little bit earlier, my girlfriends ended up with like 50 miles and 5,700 feet of elevation gain.
Dang.
So I mean, it's an epic day out there, but perfect weather, blue skies, sunshine, not too hot, and the whole time every time we got to a top of a climb and we wait for each other, I'm like, we are just so lucky, and luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. And so we were all prepared to do this ride on Tuesday morning, and it was wonderful. It was just wonderful to be able to do that and be done before noon.
Yeah.
It was just so wonderful.
That's one of those great benefits of starting early in the day with anything you do. Whether it's your writing, your reading, your whatever it may be you're doing. Like, I've accomplished this. I love doing that where I wake up before the kids or something and I come downstairs and I do some things. Like, for me, I'll edit something or I'll produce something, upload something. It's like, yeah, I've already done that. And now I've been up for 2.5 hours. You guys want breakfast? Okay, I'm ready. I got you. I got
Yeah.
your back. Oh, I'm gonna do a podcast a little bit later. Okay, cool. I got you.
Yeah. Again, I'm glad I'm a morning person because I feel like I can get up at 5 a.m. and go all day and just get so much done because I've been up since 5 a.m.
Well, because we're talking about this, what are your thoughts on, because races are morning times, about training in the morning versus training at night, and how that equates to, I don't know, performance level or accomplishments?
Well, just like everything we've already talked about, you should, as an athlete, get comfortable training in the mornings. Like I'm just going to throw the weekends. Most people have more time on the weekends to get up early. They don't have to go to their job. They can get up early and go do their training. Part of that is to get ready, get your body acclimated to racing in the morning. So you want to know
7 a.m. swim in the cold water.
Yeah, you want to know what that feels like to get your body prepared to be race ready at 7 a.m. versus 7 p.m. I know in training, some athletes are morning people, some athletes are evening people. You don't have to do that all the time. But when you're in that race specificity phase, that build phase, it's good, and you should start your training at the time that your events are going to start on whatever days are possible for you and your life schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, you have to fit training around your life schedule, but you want to be mindful and plan ahead. Oh, tomorrow I don't have to be at work, until 9. So I have some time in the morning. I'm going to get up and get my swim done, because that's the first part about triathlon. It's an early morning swim. And on those who are training for like an Ironman, who are going to be starting their run 2, 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the evening and run well into the evening, it's good also to do some of your longer running sessions starting at the time that you plan to get off the bike in an Ironman, say 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So you get your body and mind ready and prepared. That's the time of day you're going to be competing at on the run portion.
Mm-hmm. So do you not think it's a good idea, like going cold turkey on getting up early, like do your regular normal routine of sleeping? Let's say you get up at 7 or 6, whatever on your regular day, but you keep on doing that up until the night before. And I can't usually sleep the night before anyway, because I know I'm getting up at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock.
Right.
Do you cold turkey where you just like, okay, I'm going to do all week up until, let's say the race is Sunday. Saturday, I'm sleeping until 6. And then tomorrow I'm getting up at 3. Is it, you think there's any problem with that, or should you practice getting up a little earlier throughout the week so you're fresher maybe on race day, or does it matter?
No, I say I would never. If you're normally going to, doing your workouts after 5 p.m. and you're going to bed 10, 11, 12 and you're sleeping in till, 7, 8, 9, you should try to change that a little bit and start doing morning workouts at 6 and 7 in the morning instead of 6 or 7 p.m. So when you get off work, you're done and you can get to bed maybe a little earlier and try to get in a routine of going to bed at 9 or 10 instead of 11 or 12 and getting up earlier to prepare for those race day early mornings. I would never want an athlete to say, okay, you have to get up at 3 a.m. because that's what time you're getting up race day. I think that's counterintuitive.
Yeah.
And that's just you're depriving yourself of sleep at that point.
Mm-hmm. I think sometimes I can just power through one hard day. Say I'm just getting my normal sleep, nothing stressed out. I'm waking up at 6 every day or whatever for me a little. And then on race day, it's like, okay, it's gonna be a rough day. I'm gonna get up early, but I'll be wired. I'll be, the adrenaline's going, so it's gonna carry me through the day. And then I'll pay my dues the next couple of days of just being tired. But
right.
I don't want to be if I'm not comfortable getting up at 5 in the morning and just slowly working my way. I'm not saying all week you're going to start getting up at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning to practice, but just that one morning seems like be a tough transition for people, because I can't sleep the night before. Like I've already got stuff set out for my race. I started setting it out Monday, and it's Thursday. I'm just setting it out because, like you, I'm just neurotic about, okay, do I have everything? Of course I do. This is my run section. Here's my bike section. Here's my swim section. These are my piles. And there's only so many things, but I'm looking over them over and over again. Like, all right, I got 2 goggles. Okay, I got 2 goggles. I got booties just in case. Okay, I don't need my, okay, I got my wetsuits right there. Okay, that's set. Okay, and the bike, there's only so many things, but I go over and over and over of what I have laid out. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. I don't know. You get neurotic about the night before a
No.
race? No?
No, not at all. Never have, never will.
Oh.
No, if people saw my preparation, I mean, like I see how people get neurotic about it, and I'm like, that stresses me out. I like to just do what I need to do the day before. I don't want to think about it until the day before, because if I plan like you on a Monday, I still wouldn't. That would not make me feel ready, because I still want to do it last minute.
You're not fearful
I still
of
want to
forgetting
pack my
pair of
my
socks?
Ironman bags the last minute.
Okay.
That's how I prepare. That's good. That works for me.
If it works for you.
Yeah. But I will say all week I'm probably visualizing and going through the motions, especially if it's a big important race. I like to lay down and visualize how the day will go.
I'm just worried about having everything charged up, like my derailleur charged up, my Di2 derailleur.
I don't even have to worry about that, because I don't have that.
Okay.
That's why I don't have stuff like that, because that would bother me too.
Yeah, or making sure that your computers are charged up, your watches are charged for the day. Or I'm gonna have to go through. I haven't done a triathlon for a while where I cared about the splits, and I got a new watch. I want to go through and make sure I know, so I don't have to overthink it. Like, just gonna press this button, transition. This button for bike. This button to end the bike. This button to start the transition.
That stuff doesn't bother me.
Okay.
If I forgot my watch, oh well, I'm still gonna. Doesn't change my fitness, and it doesn't change how I'm gonna execute.
Because you're gonna go on perceived effort, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah.
Okay. These are just different takes.
Yep.
We both have experience and different takes, and I'm sure you will too, who's listening. Of this is how you do it, and it works for you. Do what works for you.
Yep. Exactly. And you just learn what works for you by experience.
Yeah. Well, hopefully I'll have something interesting to share on from my race day with you all next week. It's 70.3 Coeur d'Alene, and last year I think they brought back the Ironman for that 1 year in rotation for something they're doing, and now the half. I don't know if they had the half last year because I forgot, but maybe not because of COVID.
Yeah, I don't think they did yet.
The half is back, and they're already. I know crews are out there. They're already promoting it on local news. It's pretty exciting. And I'm going back. I'm going there Saturday to drop off my bike, pick up my packet, and it's a whole new thing this year. If you haven't raced a WTC race, they give you a barcode that you email that I'm going to use for a check-in, which I didn't know until I got the email. And they have designated time slots, an hour window to do your check-in for your packet pickup. It's not just show up between the hours of 4 and or 9 and 4.
Yeah, it's nice.
That's kind of cool. That is it. 361.
We got a lot in there.
Sure did. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Hope you have a great week of racing or training or your recovery. Either way, we'll see you back here next week for Wendy Mader. I'm Dave Erickson. Adios.
Adios.